In October of 2021, a young girl would run away from her home after her mom would arrive home and break up the gathering taking place inside. Shortly afterwards, in the early hours of the morning, she would be seen at the residence of another friend before exiting the home at the behest of the friend's stepfather. She would then go into the cold Minnesota night, and aside from one unconfirmed sighting that night, she has never been seen again. This is Midwest Mystery Files, The Disappearance of Nevaeh Kingbird. Hello everyone, and welcome to Midwest Mystery Files. I'm your host, Jeremiah, with just a few quick things before we start. Midwest Mystery Files is a true crime podcast focused on missing and murdered cases within the Midwestern region of the United States. I can be found on all major podcast platforms, as well as YouTube with delayed episodes. Social media and contact info will be listed at the end of the episode. If you're a returning listener and not a new one, you may have noticed my return in April and May ended up being a soft return, and I sort of disappeared over the summer. Not going to make any continued excuses. I wasn't quite as ready as I thought I was, so I just went on through the summer, kind of planning and prepping, and now we are back, and hopefully on a more consistent schedule. But anyway, going forward, I want to thank my patrons, Laura and Todd. I'm not going to encourage anyone until I get a little more consistent again to join the Patreon. They have been infinitely patient with me with all of this, between giving them refunds and I've stopped payments before for the month and other various things, but they have stuck by and they're still here, so I want to thank them. And hopefully, once I can prove to be a little more consistent and start putting out some extra stuff, I will start encouraging you guys to take a little bit more of a look at Patreon. But aside from that, without further delay, on to today's case. Nevaeh Lee Kingbird was born August 26, 2006, to mother Teddy Wind. The third oldest of 6 children, Nevaeh and her family are members of the Red Lake Ojibwe Nation of Native Americans and would reside in Bemidji, Minnesota. Bemidji is located in Beltrami County in northern Minnesota. It serves as the county seat as well as a central hub for the Red Lake, Leech Lake, and White Earth reservations. Teddy would tell Dateline that despite being the third oldest, Nevaeh was the boss of everyone and was a huge and responsible help with her siblings. Even as a young child, she was happy to help her mother pick up or take care of the children. This was a fierce energy that she kept all through growing up, which allowed her to have strong bonds with her mother. Teddy would tell Dateline that Nevaeh had confided in her that she considered herself two-spirit, meaning in Indigenous or Native American culture that she embodied both the male and female spirit, and that she liked girls over boys, both positions that Teddy was happy to support. Nevaeh was also very close with her sister, LaKaylee, who was 1 year older than Nevaeh. LaKaylee would tell Dateline that Nevaeh loved school and that she had big plans for her and LaKaylee once they graduated. LaKaylee would note a text message Nevaeh sent her, stating that once Nevaeh had graduated, they would move to New York and get an apartment together, while Nevaeh went to college and earned her bachelor's degree. 2021 was a tough year for 15-year-old Nevaeh. By the later part of the year, Nevaeh had lost 2 friends who had taken their own lives. Worried about her own well-being, Teddy would take time off work to spend time with Nevaeh and take care of her. Thursday, October 21st, was an average northern Minnesota day. Sunny but cool, with a high of 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Teddy would be back to work, and on that day in particular, Nevaeh would be in a good mood. According to Teddy, she told Nevaeh she could go to the movies, and Nevaeh seemed to be in high spirits at the idea. Teddy was working an evening shift at one of the nearby casinos, and at around 8 o'clock p.m., Teddy would attempt to call Nevaeh and check in, but would receive no answer. She would try a few more times with the same result. At this juncture, Teddy assumed that Nevaeh had not yet returned from the movies, but would continue to call until Nevaeh would eventually answer. Teddy would state that when Nevaeh answered the phone, she was slurring her words. She would ask Nevaeh what was wrong, to which Nevaeh would tell her that nothing was wrong, after which Nevaeh began crying. Knowing that Nevaeh was still mourning the loss of her friends, and extremely concerned by how Nevaeh was sounding on the phone, Teddy left work and quickly went home. Once she arrived, however, she found a lot more than what she was expecting. In the living room of the home were half a dozen or so teenagers that Teddy didn't know, one of which she would state appeared to be passed out. Teddy would continue through the house, searching for Nevaeh, eventually finding her upstairs. Nevaeh appeared glassy-eyed, staring almost through her mother. At this juncture, it became apparent that Nevaeh had been drinking. It would be eventually figured out that Nevaeh had lied about going to the movies and instead had attended a party at a house 20 miles away. The teens had ultimately been kicked out, and that's when they headed to Nevaeh's home. Upon confronting Nevaeh, a teenage female got between Teddy and Nevaeh and began pushing Teddy and attempting to fight her. Teddy quickly exited the home and got in her truck while she called the police to come remove the teenagers from her home. While waiting, the girl who had attempted to fight Teddy would exit the house. When Teddy asked her where Nevaeh was, the girl would tell her that Nevaeh had left. Teddy quickly went back inside to see her back door open and no sign of Nevaeh in the house. At this time, police would show up and start removing the teenagers from the home. As this process was occurring, Teddy would inform one of the officers that Nevaeh was missing. The officer would first tell Teddy that Nevaeh had probably just ran off for a bit. Stressing that Nevaeh was drunk, and it had gotten down to 23 degrees outside, she insisted that the police search for Nevaeh. Police would search the roads and nearby areas, but would find no sign of her. It was now into the freezing early hours of October 22nd, and while Teddy was worried, deep concern had not completely set in yet. Nevaeh had run away before, staying away for extended periods of time. She had thought Nevaeh probably just ran to a friend's house, where she would sleep it off and they could talk it through in the morning. Nevaeh could only use her phone if it was connected to Wi-Fi and would generally reach out to Teddy via social media. Concern would begin to grow, though, the next morning, when Nevaeh never reached out, or the next several days after that. In the early stages of Nevaeh's disappearance, due to a history of such things, she would be reported only as a runaway. The officer that Teddy initially spoke to would call weekly and check in to see if she had come back, but would do little else when told no. Search efforts by the family were also slowed down as most of the household would come down with COVID, hindering their ability to search on their own. Nevaeh's sister, Lakaylee, would tell Dateline that it wouldn't take long for her to suspect that Nevaeh might not have just run away. She stated that even when Nevaeh stayed away for a while in the past, she'd always reach out, either by herself or through someone else. Nevaeh had also not returned for her clothes, nor had she been in contact with their 5-year-old sister, with whom Nevaeh adored and would not have left. About a month after Nevaeh initially disappeared, her case was handed over to Detective Dan Seberg with the Bemidji Police Department. It was standard protocol with runaway cases that lasted more than 30 days to be handed over to department investigators. Detective Seberg would tell Dateline that he had instant cause for concern when Teddy informed him that Nevaeh had no social media presence and no friends had heard from her. Two things that typically happened in normal runaway cases. At this juncture, Teddy would inform Detective Seberg that she had learned where Nevaeh had gone after leaving her home the night she disappeared. Teddy's 12-year-old son had been informed by someone that Nevaeh and another girl had run to a nearby trailer park where they knew another juvenile male and climbed inside his bedroom window into one of the trailers. Detective Seberg would talk to the residents of the trailer and learn that Nevaeh and the other girl had indeed been inside the trailer. Eventually, the juvenile male's stepfather would hear voices and knock on the door, saying that the girls needed to leave. Reportedly, when Nevaeh heard the knocking, she instantly got up and jumped out the window. According to the young male and female, they looked outside to see where she had gone, but did not see any sign of her. A few weeks later, the juvenile would find Nevaeh's phone in between his bed and wall. Investigators would eventually crack Nevaeh's password and look through her phone, but it would provide nothing in clues. As to where she may have gone or who she may have had contact with, Detective Seberg would also report to Dateline that some residents in the park had surveillance cameras, but upon reviewing them, investigators found that none of the systems retained footage going that far back. Dogs and drones were used by investigators to search the area around the mobile home park. Investigators feared that Nevaeh may have gotten turned around or stopped to rest and may have been killed by exposure. These searches would turn up no clues or answers, however. The possibility of finding any clues around the mobile home park seemed grim until a crime analyst at the Bemidji Police Department made a discovery in a property damage report. The report, filed 8 hours after Nevaeh jumped out the window, stated that a teenage girl had knocked on the door of a residence located just south of the mobile home park. When the residents opened the door, they were met by a young girl who asked if someone who did not live at the residence was there, and then she left shortly afterwards. The next morning, the residents found that their detached garage had 2 broken windows in it. Investigators speculated the girl may have been seeking shelter from the cold. When Detective Seberg spoke with the residents, they described the girl as mid-teens, Native American, with dark wavy hair with a blonde or orange highlight in it. She was wearing a black zip-up hoodie with a white t-shirt, no shoes, skinny jeans, and dark-colored socks. This description would fit Nevaeh to a T in both physical appearance and the apparel that she was believed to be wearing. But when shown a picture of Nevaeh, the residents did not believe the girl who knocked on the door to be Nevaeh. It was noted by Seberg that the house was located on Washington Avenue, which was a major road leading out of town to the south. Authorities, family, and members of the community would continue searches of the area. Local authorities would receive assistance from the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension as well as the FBI as they tried to get ahead of the impending winter. Around this same time, rumors and speculation would begin to abound. Rumor would rumble about human trafficking, to which Detective Seberg would tell Dateline that there was not evidence to indicate that, but it could not be ruled out entirely. He would explain that it was prominent in the northern part of the state, but rare in Bemidji. A girl who was seen in a Target, sporting a black eye, was thought to be Nevaeh, but she was tracked down and confirmed to be someone else. Another rumor on social media would play a big part in misinformation. The Bemidji police would take to social media, as well as a December 31st article in the Bemidji Pioneer, to plead with the public to help stop the spread of rumors and misinformation. A social media post from police on the same date would state, quote, "Recently, we were made aware of a social media post indicating that Nevaeh was abducted on the North End by an African-American male driving a vehicle with Louisiana license plates. Our team of detectives, with help from the BCA, have followed this specific lead and determined that the information appears to have originated from an incident that was posted on social media in Oklahoma on December 30th, 2021. This incident does not appear to have a connection to Nevaeh's disappearance. However, this information continues to spread on social media, and as it does, the details change. A recent post brought to our attention indicates similar details, except the location mentioned is North Minneapolis. With the significant issues surrounding missing and murdered Indigenous women, we recognize the desire for everyone to want to help in locating Nevaeh Kingbird. However, when a story spreads across social media and changes with every share or repost, it consumes a lot of investigated resources. In the midst of the December searches, a massive snowstorm would hit, and authorities would cancel any official searches planned at the time. Undeterred, groups organized by Teddy and led by Nevaeh's fiercely determined uncle, Daniel Wind, continued to search for Nevaeh despite plummeting temps and thick snow. Daniel was a trained first responder and had battled wildfires in northern Minnesota, making him well prepared to help lead such a search. It was through one of these searches that some potential pieces of evidence was found. Daniel would tell the Bemidji Pioneer in a January 4th, 2022 article, "We went through an area 3 different times in 3 groups, and at the end of the day, a gentleman found some clothing. You just have to be a little more detailed with how you're digging in the snow." The clothing would be a pair of women's pants located in the mobile home court where Nevaeh was last seen, and a few days after that, a yellow sweater with strands of hair on it would be located. The sweater, once thawed, would be recognized by Teddy Wynn as a sweater similar to one that belonged to her mother, Nevaeh's grandmother. Between searches, the holidays would come and go, as well as the beginning of the new year, with no sign of Nevaeh. Family would remain determined, though, and was bound and determined to bring awareness to Nevaeh. On January 2nd, 2022, Nevaeh's family would hold a candlelight vigil at a tourist information center on the waterfront in Bemidji. Family would provide updates as well as show their fierce determination in finding Nevaeh. A Bemidji Pioneer article covering the event would quote Daniel Wind addressing the crowd about the searches, saying, quote, "We're going to keep digging through the snow if we have to. We're never going to stop until we have her. No matter what, we're not giving up." Teddy Wind would also speak on her missing daughter and the challenges of missing her and pressing on to find her. I'm not sure if she addressed the crowd with this one, or if this was her talking directly to the Pioneer, but she is quoted as saying, quote, "It's really hard. I don't wish this pain on anyone. I don't even know how to function day to day. I don't even know how to hold a conversation. I'm just hoping I find her. I want to bring her home. She knows I love her, and her siblings miss her." In February of 2022, MMIW 218 held their annual rally in Bemidji, which included a search for Nevaeh. MMIW is of course short for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. MMIW 218 is an organization based in Bemidji that was started in 2016 in response to several murders of local Indigenous women that were committed with little to no attention. The group serves as an advocacy and support group for those in the Indigenous community that have experienced loss or are seeking justice and support for missing and murdered friends and family. We've talked in previous episodes about the plight of missing and murdered Indigenous individuals, as well as the violence that is committed against them, and the generally disproportionate amount of coverage given to their cases by media and law enforcement. And we're going to talk about it more here, because it's important. In 2021, Nevaeh Kingbird was just one of more than 6,000 missing Indigenous children or teens. For Minnesota specifically, in a 2021 report on the MMIW epidemic that was presented to the Minnesota State Legislature, it was noted that while Indigenous people make up only 1% of Minnesota's population, they're victims to nearly 8% of the state's homicides. For perspective, in the 2020 census, Minnesota had a population of approximately 5,706,494, with Indigenous people making up 68,477 of that. There were 201 homicides in Minnesota in 2021. At 8%, that makes 16 Indigenous homicides. That's 2.3% of their population. While comparing the numbers, it might not seem that high. But for comparison, I looked at the closest community to me with a similar population. Waterloo, Iowa sports a population of 66,562, with a violent crime rate of 32.2% higher than the national average. In 2021, they had 5 murders. This comparison may seem a little thin, as I'm comparing a population center to a race of people spread across the state. But if you look at 5 in one city compared to 16 across a bigger area, the gap becomes quite jarring. I will have a link to the full report that was presented to the legislature in the show notes. When speaking to the Bemidji Pioneer about the February 2022 rally, MMIW 218 group organizer Adriana Goodwin would state, quote, "This was our first year incorporating a search with our annual rally, due to the closeness of Kingbird going missing and the proximity of our group. We're wanting to do more and show the community that we want and need more meaningful action from our local elected officials and systems." Daniel Wind, Nevaeh's uncle, would be quoted in the same article as saying, quote, "We just want to find her. My heart hurts every day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about my niece." Daniel and family would express their own frustration with local law enforcement and other participating agencies, as he felt himself and his family were putting far more work into searches. He would tell Dateline, quote, "First thing I noticed at that first search was that there was absolutely no law enforcement presence there whatsoever. You look at all these searches on the news, and they're out there leading searches, or they're out there taking part in them. I didn't see one cop, one patrolman. The world reacts differently to us. I'm not saying that directly to anyone. It's just the way it is for us." 5 months into Nevaeh's disappearance, the family was beginning to feel lost and unsure of what to do. Then someone new would arrive to assist. 5 years prior to Nevaeh's disappearance, Jeremy Jourdain, a 17-year-old Indigenous male, had disappeared from Bemidji after leaving a party. His backpack was found in the middle of the road with no sign of Jeremy. He was last seen a mile from the same mobile home court that Nevaeh was, and has not been seen since. In 2022, Teresa Jourdain, Jeremy's mother, contacted the same woman who had helped search for Jeremy and brought Nevaeh to her attention. That woman was Lissa Yellowbird. Lissa would describe herself to Dateline as a, quote, "justice seeker for missing, murdered, and exploited people with a preference for Indigenous people." In 2013, Lissa started the Sainish Scouts, a nonprofit organization that responds to the disappearances of Indigenous peoples. The Scouts use equipment such as boats, sonar, ground-penetrating radar, and dogs to use during searches. They have helped search and investigate across the Midwest and Northern Plains. Lissa Yellowbird herself, having worked on missing cases within North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Montana, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and even California. Lissa even helped with the search for her missing niece, Carla Yellowbird, in 2016, and ultimately helped to bring her murderer to justice. Lissa would arrive in Bemidji with her cadaver dogs to help the family search for Nevaeh. In the searches, they were able to locate a lighter and eyeliner that was the same brand that Nevaeh had carried with her. Speaking on Lissa Yellowbird's involvement, Nevaeh's mother, Teddy, would state, quote, "She brought me hope. She brought that to me." When asked about a lack of police involvement through the winter, Detective Seberg would tell Dateline that he had spoken with the family about the matter, and that he felt it would not be conducive to expend time and resources searching in knee-deep snow when the same areas would be combed over once the snow melted. He also stated that there were a few small searches looking for any animal activity that might have drug up human remains. He also noted that he had followed up on leads reported to him and had kept in contact with the family on any updates. When asked about the items found in the snow, Detective Seberg expressed doubt that the jeans found belonged to Nevaeh, as they showed signs of being overworn and had most likely been in the location since before Nevaeh's disappearance. As far as the sweater that allegedly belonged to Nevaeh's grandmother, the hair found on the sweater did not belong to Nevaeh. Come spring of 2022, as the snow began to melt, Seberg would jump into action organizing new searches. This time, 1,100 acres was scoured with the use of planes, ATVs, underwater search equipment, GPS tracking devices, dog teams, and drones. According to the Bemidji Pioneer, other organizations assisting in the search included Nevaeh's family, Christian Aid Ministries Minnesota Search and Rescue, the Beltrami Sheriff's Office, the Leech Lake Tribal Police Department, the Red Lake Tribal Police Department, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, Lakes Area Dive Team, and Vigilant Canine Operations. Unfortunately, with the massive searches and renewed feeling of hope from the family that investigators were looking to help them, the searches were unable to uncover anything new. The spring would move into summer, and August 26th, Nevaeh's 16th birthday, would come without its birthday girl. The family would still honor her birthday and memory by holding a balloon release. Since the time of the balloon release, no new information has surfaced, despite continued searches by family with the help of Lissa Yellowbird, or the large-scale searches conducted by law enforcement and other participating agencies, the last of which took place in September of 2023. When asked about Nevaeh's case and other local missing cases, such as Jeremy Jourdain, Bemidji Police Chief Mike Maston would tell the Bemidji Pioneer, quote, "Our department has worked diligently to find these individuals. The Bemidji Police Department has collaborated with local, tribal, state, and federal law enforcement agencies and other agencies to investigate hundreds of leads in these cases. We've organized dozens of searches, aerial, ground, underwater. We've enlisted the help of K-9 teams. We've done excavations. We've done draining of stormwater ponds, all in an effort to find these missing children." Maston would also speak on working with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, as well as the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center to help bring awareness and tips throughout the country, saying, quote, "These efforts have generated leads across the country that our investigators and detectives have traveled to search, but none have provided answers to what happened to Nevaeh or Jeremy. Ultimately, we have no answers to their disappearances to this day. That means there's more work to do, to bring closure to the pain and loss felt by the community and by their families. Today's search is a continuation of hope to find answers in these cases." Teddy Wind would also express her gratitude, telling the Pioneer, quote, "I've been very emotional, and I feel very grateful. I guess the feeling I had most of the time is that I'm alone, and I know that I'm not, but that feeling is there. I came here today, and to see everybody come together to try and help me and help the other families look for our loved ones just sparked some more hope into me, and I'm hoping that we get some answers for everyone." Outside of the searches, the family has continued to partake in rallies and hold candlelight vigils, the last of which occurred in Bemidji on August 26, 2024, Nevaeh's 18th birthday. Through the endless searches and no answers, the family continues to remain strong and determined in their search for Nevaeh and to help others. LaKaylee Kingbird, Nevaeh's sister, graduated high school and now attends a 2-year program to obtain a law enforcement degree. She would tell KARE in Minneapolis, quote, "The way her investigation was handled, and the way her case is still being handled, I just want to spread awareness for not just my sister, but everybody else that didn't get any attention. Our people go missing, and not just the women, the guys too. It's a pandemic for our people." After obtaining her degree, LaKaylee plans to pursue law school with the goal of working at Minnesota's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Office, a state office that provides resources and support to Indigenous families and communities in Minnesota. The MMIR office's mission is to reduce and end violence against Indigenous people in the state. It was established after the report to the Minnesota legislature in 2021. Teddy Wind was also taking law enforcement classes at the time of Nevaeh's disappearance, and now pursues them part-time. She hopes to graduate with LaKaylee in 2026. It has been almost 3 years since 15-year-old Nevaeh Kingbird went out into the night and has not been seen since. Despite searches and pleas for any sort of tips or information, no new answers have been found. Only theories. To me, there are only two, and they're both straightforward and cannot really be speculated on too deeply. The first is that Nevaeh either got turned around, strayed too far from home, or became exhausted and stopped to rest and was the victim of exposure and the elements. Or she possibly even sustained an accidental injury somewhere where she could not easily find help. Given the cold temps, it's not hard to believe this is a likely scenario. Unfortunately, we just have no signs or physical evidence to back it up completely. If this is the case, we can only hope it's a matter of time before something is found that can give the family closure. The other is that she either left of her own volition or met with foul play. At this juncture, as far as we know publicly, there is really nothing to support that other than the fact it's a possibility. You could say the rate of violence against Indigenous individuals lends some credence to it. However, it's strictly anecdotal. And much like the exposure theory, we can only hope it is a matter of time before something is found that could provide some answers. It seems likely that the girl seen at the residence near the mobile home court was Nevaeh, which, if it was, tells us she was still nearby for a time at least. But we are now only left with the question of what happened afterwards. Nevaeh Kingbird will be missing for 3 years this October. She just turned 18 years old, and rather being able to celebrate with her family, she remains one of the many, many faces of the MMIW movement, lost but not forgotten by those with whom she matters the most. She was a daughter, sister, and a niece. She loved school and had big plans to move to the city and attend college with her sister. As family and the community continue their unrelenting quest for answers, we can keep hope alive that she will be found. Nevaeh Kingbird has had more attention brought to her case than other girls in her situation, but it is not nearly enough. I encourage you all to share her story, as well as the stories of any other Indigenous victims that you come across. We can all assist, even in the smallest way, to help give this community answers. When last seen, 15-year-old Nevaeh Kingbird was described as a Native American female, brown hair, brown eyes, standing 5'4" and weighing 120 pounds. She has a scar near her left eyebrow and a scar on the back of her left thigh, and her ears are pierced. At the time of her disappearance, Nevaeh had a blonde streak on one side of her hair. She was wearing a black zip-up sweatshirt or a red sweatshirt with a logo of a bull wearing a feather headdress, jeans, black slide-type Nike sandals with a Nike logo and red lettering, and unspecified outerwear. She was last seen in the Nymore neighborhood of Bemidji, Minnesota on October 22, 2021, and if alive today, she would be 18 years old. If you have any information on the disappearance of Nevaeh Kingbird, please contact the Bemidji Police tip line at 218-333-9111 or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. If you're looking for more information, the Bemidji Pioneer has plenty of coverage. There is also the Dateline Missing in America podcast episode on Nevaeh, which contains several interviews with family and law enforcement. Also, check out the Bring Nevaeh Kingbird Home Facebook page. For further resources on the epidemic of violence in the Indigenous community, I highly recommend listening to Connie Walker's podcast, Stolen. Seasons 1 and 3 focus on American cases. Season 2 focuses on the residential school program in Canada and its long-term psychological effects on the Indigenous community. That being said, we had the same program in the US, so I recommend listening. And I do believe it's only available on Spotify. I also recommend reading Highway of Tears, a true story of racism, indifference, and the pursuit of justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls by Jessica McDermott. This also focuses solely on Canada, but it is also a very informative read. I will post links to all of these in the show notes. If you wish to let me know what you think happened, have case suggestions or comments, or just want to follow me and the show on social media, I can be found on Instagram at Midwest Mystery Files, Twitter at Files Midwest, and on Facebook by searching for Midwest Mystery Files. You can also email me at midwestmysteryfilespod@gmail.com. I also post photos and sometimes links relevant to each case on social media, mainly on Facebook and Instagram. Lastly, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Good Pods, please feel free to rate and review the show. This helps make the show more visible in searches, and more importantly, helps bring attention to the cases I cover. Thank you to all who have done so already. Take care, everyone, and I will see you all next time.